morning. Welcome to the Hoosier Huddle post-game podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me is Ethan Roberts and Zach Greene. Indiana is victorious, their first victory of the 2023 season as they knock off the Indiana State Sycamores 41-7 in a game where there were a lot of great things. There were a few things to clean up, and I could bet the defense is pretty ticked off that they didn't get the shutout. But an overall really good performance against Indiana State, and it looks like Indiana might have found their starting quarterback, at least for week 3, according to Tom Allen postgame. Indiana's offense, 558 total yards. Taven Jackson got the start. He completed 18 of 21 passes for 236 yards. No touchdowns, though. He had a long pass and catch with Cam Camper wiped out, which I think would have been ruled a touchdown on replay. But Zach Carpenter was an ineligible man downfield. He was called for 2 of those. Rewatching that play this morning, he just wandered downfield a little too much on the RPO play. That'll get cleaned up. Omar Cooper Jr. came off the bench, 7 catches, 101 yards. His breakout game as a Hoosier. Jalen Lucas, of course, the star of the show on offense early, 2 25-yard touchdown runs. Let's start with Ethan. Ethan, what was your takeaway from the game last night?
My first takeaway is that this defense looks special. And they showed flashes of that last weekend against Ohio State. They even forced a couple of turnovers against Ohio State, and they allowed under 100 total yards against Indiana State. And I think that can build great momentum going into next week against Louisville at Lucas Oil Stadium. On offense, definitely some things to clean up penalty-wise, but I do think that at least knowing or assuming you have a certain starting quarterback going into week 3, it might help clean up some of those things in terms of play calling and opening up the offense.
Yeah, Taven Jackson came in. They threw the ball. They threw the ball in total 37 times. Brandon Sorsby threw it 16, completed 9. Zach, you were down on the field and in that end zone that Jalen Lucas scored both of his touchdowns in. Just take us through the feeling of, oh man, here he comes around the corner and there he goes.
Oh, you could tell he's just a different player with his speed. His elusiveness is unlike any player I've ever seen live. Definitely 4.3, 4.2 speed, NFL type talent, and he gets around that corner, man, and he's just gone. Very hard to tackle. His frame is small, but in reality, it makes it harder for them to tackle him because he is only 5'6", 5'7", but with 4.3 speed, man, he turns that corner and he is in the end zone.
Yeah, with the 2 touchdowns, Jalen Lucas was also involved in the Indiana State touchdown on a fumble that got picked up and returned for 75 yards for Indiana State's only points. It looked like he got hit on the elbow with the helmet and just fumbled the ball. That's the danger of running him up the middle. But as people have said on other post-game shows, you got to run him up the middle a few times because Indiana used a lot of backs yesterday, and it's really good. But if you could tell, hey, Jalen Lucas is in, he's going to run to the outside, you become predictable. And maybe the balance is a little different. But overall, I thought he had a great game. Josh Henderson, do-it-all running back, had 12 carries for 60 yards. Also in the receiving game, 3 catches for 55 yards. He scored as well late in the game. And he had a 12-yard kickoff return when Indiana State just didn't want to kick it to Jalen Lucas. So if he could get that second kick returner going, that works as well. Let's talk about the quarterback situation. Tom Allen, after the game, said that he'll decide on a starter for week 3. He did not commit to that guy would start the rest of the season. I think this might be a game-by-game situation, but the fog is starting to clear on the quarterback situation. Taven Jackson looked the part last night, had a little bit of a scare when he took a hit in the first quarter. Sorsby came in for play. Jackson came back out, but that was a lot of deja vu over the last 3 or 4 years with quarterbacks getting hurt. Very efficient, 18 to 21. Found a ton of receivers. Really found a rhythm with Omar Cooper and Donovan McCulley, as well as Cam Camper. The concern with the receiving core, EJ Williams left the game, did not return. He was favoring his hand after catching the first quarter, and Cam Camper left the game as well. Did not return, but it looks like he's okay. He was still fully dressed. He was still fully dressed on the sideline. If you could get Cam Camper back for Louisville, you're in business. We'll see what happens with EJ Williams. Tom Allen was adamant he's not putting out any injury stuff since we get the availability report 2 hours before kickoff, which, look, I get that the coaches don't want to put out that report, and before they would answer your questions. Now you have the availability report, and they're not going to answer your questions. So a little bit of, it's not even gamesmanship. It's a little bit of, hey, you got what you wanted, and now I don't have to talk about it because we have an availability report. Zach, what's your take on the quarterbacks? Both played pretty well, but did someone separate themselves enough for the coaching staff to meet and make a decision?
Taven for sure. At least in the first quarter, the throw that impressed me the most was, I think they were about on the 30 or 40-yard line, and he stayed in the pocket. And this was after he left the game and he got rocked. But I mean, you want a quarterback who's going to take those hits. And I just thought he separated himself. And Sorsby did have some good throws, but if you're judging the week 3 starter off yesterday's game, you're gonna go with Taven. You're gonna go with Taven.
I thought so too. And it wasn't, look, it's Indiana State. You're gonna perform well, better than somebody looks against Ohio State. But even in the Ohio State game, the offense, I thought he commanded the offense a little bit better. Last night he commanded the offense. I think the throw you're alluding to was the Cam Camper diving catch one, fully extended, which, that throw gets overlooked because it was a great catch. It might be a catch of the year candidate as well. He stood in the pocket, took a hit. It really looked like he got hit late, especially on the one that he got hit in the hip. But yeah, I agree. I thought Taven, coming out of the game, he's taking control of this quarterback competition. I still think both guys will play, the rest of the way. But, I think you have your clear cut, starting quarterback, at least for Louisville. We'll see if they're, if he could put two good games in a row, that'll start building consistency too. Ethan, what was your take on quarterbacks?
So I thought Sorsby looked really good, and I think he got overlooked because of how well Taven played. I think Sorsby has a really great arm. He was rifling some outside the number throws last night, and they looked really good. But I think the issue with Sorsby starting is that when those plays get off script, and it's you got to go make a play, especially against better competition coming up down the stretch, I think that Taven Jackson gives IU the edge right now.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's not a knock on Brandon Sorsby. They've been very even through spring ball, through fall practice, and now through most of the first 2 games. But it I don't think it's you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. But I think that you need to roll with the guy going forward to get him the reps in practice and not split it. And I think Taven's starting to take control of that. Zach, one more thing on the final thoughts on Indiana State.
The game yesterday, I thought the 2 bright spots were definitely the defense as well as Taven starting to separate himself. And what just looked not good was the special teams performance. Taven Tyreek McDaniels running into the kicker there. That can't happen. A couple other miscues, but going forward, you got to clean those up against Louisville. And I thought Omar Cooper getting his fair share was definitely a bright spot. They were, soft coverage, ran a lot of curl routes, but he looked good, man. He looked good and was able to break a couple tackles at the end. So
Yeah, a lot of strong hand catches, a lot of broken tackles there. The special teams penalty, you know, people say, well, there's no accountability. And I heard this on the post game, Colin's show with Ken Bikeoff and Austin Render yesterday. Fans complain it's coaching and accountability. Well, one of the guys who ran into the kicker is Andre Carter, who's arguably your best defensive player. Are you really going to sit him on the bench? No, he's going to do up downs at practice or whatever the punishment at practice is. Those things are fixable. I thought the kick catch interference was, Tom Allen, Ethan said it was an act of aggression, which he doesn't mind that much. It just was a microsecond early. And he didn't agree with the call, which I don't expect the Big Ten or whoever was the refereeing crew to call us like they did Ohio State last week and say, oh, we missed one. The two kicks out of bounds is concerning. That was an issue with Chris Freeman last year. Alejandro Quintero had the other one, but Chris Freeman in some big spots. The one against Western Kentucky late in the game when you're trying to push for overtime to give that kind of team, better field position and 10 free yards where field goal wins the game. You can't do. And, that's got to be something that Casey Teagarden, who's a special teams coordinator, looks at. But look, they Nico Radicic and Chris Freeman both hit their field goals, which is good. They both hit extra points, which is good. And then, there weren't the holdings and blocks in the back on the kicks, which also could speak to the talent difference between Indiana and Indiana State and Indiana and Ohio State. But they cleaned out that up, enough to where it wasn't an issue. And then, the two Zach Carpenters, illegal man downfield on some big passing plays. You got to figure that out. He's a veteran guy. He wasn't egregiously downfield. He was maybe a yard and a half, but it's early in the season, and they love to call those penalties early in the season. But overall, I thought Indiana acquitted themselves well. And they head into the most important game of the early season so far against Louisville next week in pretty good shape. Ethan, what's your final take on Indiana State?
I think the defense played really well, man. There's multiple people in the media availability talking about how the defense has stepped up and how they expect to be the best defense in the Big Ten, which I think is lofty expectations, but I really think those group of guys believe that they can do that. I think as Zach referred to earlier, the penalties, you can't be doing that against FBS opponents. It's just, there were silly mistakes, and Tom Allen referred to that in his post-game presser. Those got to get cleaned up before you go into Louisville.
Yeah, he even called them stupid, and you don't see Tom Allen get angry that much. He called them stupid penalties, and they'll get cleaned up. Quickly before we break out of here, Louisville games on Saturday at Lucas Oil Stadium at noon on Big Ten Network. We've dubbed this the most important game on the schedule. A win here, and you're looking at 2-1, and you're in business going forward. You should beat Akron after that at 3-1, needing 3 more wins for bowl game. Zach, just how important is this Louisville game? It's a matchup opponent against a familiar coach, Jeff Brom, who's been at Purdue since 2017, who was at Purdue 2017 to 2022. You're up in Indy. You're going to have a lot of alumni there. It's a game that IU you need to win this game.
Yeah, you need to win this game for like the spirit of the program. It kind of has, for me, I believe, was a Cincinnati game in 2021 a week 3 game.
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, I get that same feeling just because It is week 3 early on in the season, relatively local opponent. And I mean, the thing is I feel like which we easily could have won that since the game, like one game or one play completely changes, the current state of the program. And I hate to say it, but if we lose, it's not looking good for Tom Allen and the tender of his team.
Yeah, a loss. The danger is you put too much on this game, and if you lose, your season's over. Which is, you could get to that point, but there are 7 toss-up games. We said in the preseason, 7 toss-up games. This is toss-up game number 1, and what you need to do is go 4-3. This is, you want to get those toss-up games early, like you said. If you start losing, who knows how long it'll take to recover. You do have another one coming up in a couple weeks at Maryland. You don't want to drop both of them. If you could split those, go into Michigan maybe 3-3, or go into Rutgers at homecoming at 3-3. That's another toss-up game. But yeah, Ethan, what's your take on the Louisville game?
I think Louisville, IU is going to be their first real challenge. Louisville has a really good backfield. I mean, Jawar Jordan, he's kind of like a Jalen Lucas. He's like 5'10", small frame, but he's got 14 carries on the season, and he's averaging 17 yards a carry. So obviously, I mean, over 200 yards rushing in the season. Can our linebackers, can the defensive line, the front 7 collectively stop the running back? And then Jack Plummer, former Purdue, former California quarterback, he's got a lot of mileage on him right now, and he's already thrown 3 interceptions this season. So can the IU defense build off of that momentum that they've had the last 2 weeks? Maybe force another turnover, hold them to less than 200 yards passing? Can the defense continue on the momentum?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Zach, for joining us for the post game. We'll be up in Indy on Saturday at noon to bring you all the coverage from Indiana Louisville. We'll have all the pregame coverage all week, starting on Monday with our Media Mondays. We'll have interviews with players. We'll do our pregame podcast with TJ. We'll be back on Sunday with our After the Dust Settles on Indiana State as well with Alex Compton. So, guys, thank you. Fans, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. You can follow us on Twitter at Hoosier_Huddle. Follow us on Instagram as well. Zach, you did a great job on Instagram last night. Great pictures of Jalen Lucas' touchdown. That is also at Hoosier_Huddle. And keep coming back to HoosierHuddle.com. Thank you all.